It's good to see all of you and to be back with you again. I hope you've had a good week this week. It's good to see some sunshine this week after all this rain and gloomy weather we've had. It's always good to look out and see the bright sunshine that the Lord has blessed us with. I want to begin today a new series on the life of Joseph. I don't really know yet how in depth that we'll look at this. We may just go through and pull out the major parts, but we'll see where the Lord leads in it. But I want to begin today in chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. We're introduced here to Jacob's family in this chapter, just as of an introduction to our study in this. I just want to take a moment and look at this as being, we're talking about Jacob's family here. That's what verse 1 is telling us. But really and truly, we talk more of Joseph in this from the remaining chapters out. I think the next chapter doesn't deal specifically with Joseph in the detail that the others do, but basically we can say from chapter 37 to the close of the book of Genesis, it deals with Joseph's life, the things that are around him, the things that are happening then, how God is using him. And that's the main point I want us to see this morning. Now, this is a very in-depth look at Joseph's life. More chapters in the book of Genesis are given to Joseph than to any other one. More chapters than even Abraham has dealing with him. More chapters than Isaac has dealing with his life. It is the life of Joseph. So we ask ourselves why that there's so much focus upon Joseph. Well, you can look at it from a secular point of view, and look, this is just a good story to read. If we just read it for the literary purposes of it, oh, what a read it would be. You have all the dynamics there of a great read. You have a central character. You have the dynamics of family, the good, the bad of the family, those that do not want to treat one brother right. One brother stands up for good and righteousness, the others don't. There's actually a hatred between them because of that and because of who Joseph is. And so you have the secular draw, and then you have the spiritual draw of this book, of Joseph, the life of Joseph here in chapter 37 proceeding. And it is a theological draw, spiritual draw. And know and also understand that Joseph was a foreshadowing of Christ here in the Old Testament. So you have all those dynamics and even some more that we won't mention of Joseph. So we see why that he's such a good study, and he's worth our time and our effort to go in and look at his life and just see what the Lord would have us to glean from that. So our title of the message today is God's Plan for Joseph. Genesis chapter 37. I'm going to read 3 verses, I believe, to kind of kick it off here for us. I'm going to begin with verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his brethren, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more and more, all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. That's God's plan for Joseph. First point I want us to look at, and this deals with the first 7 verses, we'll not read them all for the sake of time today, is God's plan for Joseph began with the dream as far as we're looking at it from our standpoint of our study today. We see in this passage that Joseph was 17 years old when this is beginning here. We pick up that far into his life. And we understand that Joseph was loved by Jacob more than all of his brethren. Now we can look at this and say that's going to create a problem, because we know that it will. We've maybe in a family that way. We may have seen that in a family, and I witnessed it personally. But we know that playing favorites. A parent playing favorites is like a parent playing with fire. It usually doesn't work out very good. Someone's going to get hurt, and it causes strife and contention within the family, and it does this one. And we'll see here that because Jacob loved Joseph so much, he elevated him above the brothers, even though he was a great deal younger than many of the other brothers. I think he was like 11th in line. And we see here that, as far as inheritance in that day and the prestige of being the leader of the family, Joseph was far from that position. The other ones outweighed him in that respect as far as culture was in that day. But Joseph dreamed a dream. And by the dreaming of this dream, it changed everything. Joseph dreamed a dream that we'll not go through every word of that, but it more or less revealed without saying it. It more or less revealed to his brothers that he would one day rule over them. And look, that did not sit well with them at all. Look, we've already read that in verse 4, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Sin in a family, in every circumstance, but especially in the gravity of this sin in a family, can destroy the family. And it does in one sense here. His brothers hate him already. And now he comes to them and tells them that he's dreamed a dream that he's one day going to rule over them. Well, that didn't sit well. In the close of verse 8, it picks up and says they hated him yet more for his dreams and his words. They envied and hated him because of these things. Verse 9 says, and he dreamed yet another dream, and he told it his brethren, and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him. So now none of them understand this dream because Joseph is far down the line socially as to what the leader of the family would be, what the inheritance would be. But yet he stands before them and tells them, the brothers, that he's going to be over them. And now he stands before his father and says that the father and his mother would be over them. He would be over them. And that's just unheard of. But I want you to come down into verse 11 and see this. I think it's a very good verse. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. The brothers envied him. They hated and envied him. Now, I've always looked at the word envy as someone having something that you want or you like or you wish that you had. From what I can research and understand the word envy in this verse, it is, yes, they saw that Joseph had something that they didn't have. They looked at Joseph and saw that he was basically, he was everything that his brothers weren't, if you're going to look at it that way. But it's not that they wanted and they sought the goodness that was in Joseph, the righteousness that they saw in Joseph, the respect for the father, the obedience to the father. They did not seek those things, but they saw that Joseph had them and they resented him for it. They didn't like that he was that way. It would have been better in their eyes if Joseph was like them. Then there would be no good in the family. There'd be no one standing out in the family. That one that wore that coat of many colors that set him apart and kind of showed that he was up and above the rest. He would one day, there's a garment of leadership there with the sleeves in it, which was an abnormal thing for the common person in that day to have a coat with sleeves in it. So we see that they envied and they hated their brother. They envied him and hated him to the point that they thought of murder. We come down and begin in verses 12 through 25, and we see this envy and this hate manifested. Now, I want you to think about this within the dynamics of a family, and it's true everywhere, but especially within a family unit. If there's envy and hatred in a family between siblings, one day it's going to bubble over if it's not handled. And it should be, the parents should see this going on and understand it, because most times the siblings are not going to see this and say that's got to be dealt with. It's going to cause problems. No, it's just going to continue to grow and fester and boil and boil and boil so much that one day it's going to bubble over and there's going to be a great problem. Well, that has happened here because Jacob did not recognize it. If he did, he didn't deal with it. He didn't try to solve this animosity between those brothers. He didn't try to make things right and maybe see that part of that was his problem. Jacob should have recognized this because he grew up in that type family that recognized one child as being better than the other. In the eyes of the father, Esau was greater, and Joseph was greater in the eyes of Rebekah. And we want to understand here that, look, that just does not work. But even though Jacob was that way, he was still the head of the family. So we come down in these next verses and we see that Jacob requested that Joseph go and find his brethren. They were tending the flocks out in Shechem. Now this is kind of strange when you begin to think about it. You would think there'd be enough lush pasture there around the home that they could gather the flocks together and feed them there, shepherd them there. But they were, from what I can gather, 40 to 50 miles away from home. South of Jerusalem is their home, and they were as far to the north of Jerusalem as they were south of Jerusalem in the home. They're a great distance from home. So Joseph is obedient to the father, just like Christ was, that picture of Christ. He goes to Shechem. He looks for them. He can't find them. He finds a gentleman there, searches him out, and he comes to find out that his brothers are in Dothan, yet further north. So they are a great distance from their home. And I think you can kind of read between the lines here that these brothers just wanted to be away from home. They didn't want anyone to know what they were doing. They were just out doing their thing, and they wanted to be away from their father. They wanted to be away from Joseph. They didn't want any part of that. They are united amongst themselves, these other brothers. And they see Joseph coming. And when they see him coming, then it begins to grow in their heart. They see murder. They want to take his life. They just want to get rid of him. They want to put an end to this dreamer. They're going to stop those dreams. They don't want to see or hear those dreams anymore. They don't want them to come up again. And they're going to do that and take matters into their own hands. They say, we'll slay him. Well, it comes to pass that, God is in this and he's working. It's not that God worked through all this work that God caused these things to happen, but they were happening, and God used them to get Joseph where he wanted him to be. And God's providence began to come about here, beginning in verse 26. And they come to understand that Joseph wouldn't have done any good for them to slay him. There'd be nothing in that. So they decided they would sell him to the Ishmaelites that were coming by, these slave traders, on their way to Egypt. And they did. They took him out of the pit and they sold him to the slave traders. God was working in that because that's where Joseph needed to be. He did not need to remain in the land of Canaan, and God worked here in this instance to bring him down into Egypt. And from there, God's going to begin to work, and he's going to do a great work. And he's going to preserve his people now because of what we have seen as laying the foundation here in chapter 37 of Genesis. I encourage you, if you would like to read through the rest of this chapter and just think on Joseph and his life, and we'll be back here again in our next study. The Lord continues to lead there, and I believe that he will. And we'll see how God works through the life of Joseph And we see there the foreshadowing of Christ. Joseph was sent to a people that didn't want him. Neither was Christ. He wasn't wanted amongst his own people. But we see that he came to deliver, and he brought good, and so did Joseph. Take care, church. God bless you, and we will have our next study soon.